Welcome back to the Abe Podcast. This is Talib Kareem, CEO of Abe, and we are excited to have a tremendously well-timed guest, a guest who is, I think, very perfect for the moment that we find ourselves in. Across this country, we have been I believe, not only confronted with the pandemic of COVID, but in many ways, a pandemic of violence. Here in the nation's capital, we marked the 200th murder, 200th killing in the nation's capital. But I've heard that in other places of the country, the murder rate is even higher. And the question is, what is going on? What is happening in this particular time that is causing people, particularly young people, and especially young people of color, to be engaged in such horrendous acts that are resulting in deaths? I think in Baltimore, the governor of Maryland marked that the most recent killing in the city of Baltimore, which marked, I believe, one of their 200th cases, and we can find out for sure, was the death of a child. And the question is, what is happening in our nation that is leading to this type of carnage? And yet we have protests happening because of the deaths that are interracial or between people of different races. And so we have a lot of commotion happening in different parts of our country, both in the case in Atlanta of Ahmaud Arbery and the case of Kyle Rittenhouse in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Protests abound. But what is happening in terms of the outrage for the killings that are happening on the streets of Washington, D.C. and Memphis, Tennessee, and across this country? And so we are delighted to have a guest who is very informed about this issue, a fellow lawyer, one of the lawyers at Abe Legal, who is available to help people who have both criminal law cases, constitutional law cases, and even personal injury cases, and someone who knows the criminal system inside and out because he is a former criminal prosecutor. That is none other than attorney Martinis Jackson. Let me bring on Martinez. Martinez, welcome to the Abe Podcast. How are you doing, and where are you based today?
Hey, Talib, I'm actually in my home office today. Thanks for having me on the podcast.
Well, we're excited to have you, and we're glad that you could join us, Martinez. Tell us, if I was going to read a book called The Making of Martinis Jackson, and I was going to scroll through my reader, I like the audiobook versions. I was going to scroll through up to the part of coming out of high school, going into college. What would I hear on that audiobook, and what would be some of the stories that I would read or listen to?
Yeah, I think the first half of the book would probably be titled The Awakening. I think coming out of high school, like many people I know, I was a little naive, a little green, didn't truly understand what was going on in the world around me. And it wasn't until I got to college and I got kind of exposed through not only academics, but just social settings with different friends from different walks of life that I started to understand what was going on around me. And so I would definitely title that first section of the book, The Awakening. And as I've become more aware of my surroundings and my circumstances, whether it be the issues that impact African Americans like myself, my family and friends, or just issues with capitalism in general, I think reading more, having more experiences would lead to that next chapter or the next section of the book, which would be, the journey. And that journey is finding my purpose in life, which changes and has changed numerous times throughout my relationships with family, friends, wife, kids, and also my profession too. So I think that's how I would divide the book up. And right now I'm still in that journey phase in my professional career and in my life, just constantly refining what my purpose is in life and how I want to pursue that purpose.
Now, just to get more, into the nitty gritty of that chapter, where did you go to school, and what led you from there to the next step in going to law school?
Yeah, so born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee, and went to Christian Brothers University. There, I studied English, and I love basketball. Fell in love with basketball at an early age, and I wanted to be a basketball coach. So I was a teacher and a basketball coach in high school. And as I started to do more reading throughout my tenure as a teacher, I started to get the idea that I wanted to do a little bit more involving the civil rights. And so I decided that I wanted to pursue a career in law, and I wanted to go to Howard University. I really wanted to go to a HBCU because A Different World was one of my favorite shows growing up. And, I felt like Howard would give me that A Different World experience. And so I went to Howard. I graduated, did well there, spent some time as a prosecutor in the District of Columbia. And then from there, eventually I started my own practice, and now I do some civil rights work, as you stated, personal injury work, and I also do criminal defense as well.
Now, can you give me a you know an idea about what it was like being a prosecutor? I understand you even wrote a book, so I know you know this firsthand. What was that like, especially coming from the streets of Memphis, and maybe give us a sketch of what Memphis was like, when you were growing up. I know Memphis has always been, kind of, as they like to call it, gritty to some extent, or there are definitely gritty parts. But how was life then, and contrasted to what life is like for, a young 17, 18-year-old, or even, college student, Christian Brothers College, Christian Brothers University now,
Yeah.
today?
I mean, I love my city. I loved it then. I still love it now. I mean, Memphis, like most cities, has its good and bad, right? Of course, it has historically been one of the poorest, larger cities in the country, and so it suffers from a lot of the issues that poor cities suffer from. Whether it's issues with education, of course, there's a history of racism in the city. But there are a lot of great things about the city. I mean, blues, barbecue, and basketball is what it's known for. People are very humble there. People are very genuine and loving. But of course, anytime you have poverty, you're going to have issues with violence. You're going to have issues with lack of education. And so, being there for 27 years before leaving and coming to DC, I experienced all those things, the positive and the negatives.
So, if I could ask, in terms of particularly the most recent spate of violence that is happening, and we're going to talk about, hone in on Memphis, but then we'll kind of expand it outwards. What do you think is behind this? Again, we talk about the most recent shooting of the rapper Young Dolph, who is also known in terms of his government name as Adolph Thornton Jr. Born in Chicago, I'm not mistaken, but spending a lot of his time in Memphis, and having been gunned down at a popular black-owned bakery, a cookie shop, even that was being celebrated, and now to have that tragedy. What does that mean to you as someone who grew up in Memphis, a former prosecutor, and a father, a husband? What does that mean to you, and what are your thoughts about that particular case?
I mean, it's really saddening. I mean, it's interesting because my oldest son kind of introduced me to Young Dolph's music. And I was a huge fan, been a huge fan of it for a while. Obviously, he's a hometown legend, and in a city where there aren't a lot of opportunities for a lot of people, and people are looking for hope, to see someone from where they're from go out and make it. He was an independent artist, and he often came back and gave back. I mean, that was the reason he was in Memphis, was to do his annual turkey drive. So no, it was very saddening. I get the sense from my friends and family who are still there that it's a very depressing time in the city right now. I mean, they're on pace to beat last year's record number of homicides. I think right now at 291 murders. I know you mentioned the number of murders in DC and Baltimore on the rise. The same is true as in Memphis. And I think anytime you have limited opportunities alongside, a pandemic that is hurting a particular group of people, African Americans were hit hard the most with this pandemic. I think that just results in more and more violence, more despair, and a lot more senseless killings.
Sorry about that. I was talking, but it wasn't on the line. You talk about some of the deeper issues that are causing this violence. You mentioned issues of homelessness. You mentioned issues of economic insecurity, and some I've heard talk about the availability of firearms. I think there's an open carry law now in Tennessee that some point to this. I mean, do you think that is is it? And what do you think might be if you had the ability to have a sweeping reform, be it either in a law that could be passed, or be it a reform in terms of a street rule, what would that be? What would you do if you had it your way to end this type of violence in your hometown of Memphis, but something that could perhaps be modeled across this country?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done the research, so I don't know whether it's a direct correlation or causation between the new law and the uptick in homicides. But I will say this: there has been an uptick in homicides. The gun law, I think, clearly doesn't require you to have a license, which means you don't have to get training. You can have the firearm as long as you're not a convicted felon, as long as you're of age or you're not convicted of a DUI. You can have it in your vehicle, which means that what's happening in the city is people are stealing firearms out of vehicles and then using them in homicides or other types of crimes. And so, if there was one thing that I would point to, I would definitely consider, changing that law, doing away with it, at least requiring people to have a license so they have to go to a class, making it so that they have to secure it if it's in their vehicle so it's not stolen out of the vehicle and used in another offense.
And we have one of our civil rights activists locally, Sheikh Imam Akbar, saying that it's good to hear this discussion. But tell me, what is going on with the consciousness of the people? I'm sure that, my father, who was a city councilman in Memphis, Tennessee, legendary civil rights leader, used to also often talk about the making of people's minds, and that the minds that basically are being made lead to actions, if you will. And the question is, what can we do to change the mindset of the people to the point where we can begin changing the actions? One of the other things that my father said is that he used to oftentimes talk about we need to look, to trying to clean up the media, what is being consumed by our children. So he dedicated himself to making sure that the books that are in Memphis public schools, for example, included books that reflected the stories of the young people who were going to those schools as one part, and also try to challenge the media to improve the images that were being portrayed in television and radio and other venues. What might you also do beyond just the limiting the ability for people to steal these firearms and use them in other offenses? What else might you recommend?
I would say, for each individual, do what you can. Um, you know, you don't have to be the president of the United States to affect change, or a congressman, or even or congresswoman, or a lawyer. If you can just instill values in the individuals in your family, having open conversations with them, having open conversations with your children, whatever your profession is, find a way to affect change. I do civil rights cases, I do personal injury cases, criminal defense. And so I bring that perspective to each client that I service. I am admitted to practice in Tennessee. I do take cases in Tennessee. So I just do my little bit. And if everybody can do what they can, I think as a whole, we can affect change. So whatever it is that you do, whether you're a teacher, a lawyer, blue collar worker, whatever it is, try to find a way to make some impact in your community. And young Dolph was, trying to do that as well. What he did was give back to people who needed turkeys for Thanksgiving. And so it may seem small, but for those families who needed food, it's a big thing. So that's what I would say do. Every individual has a responsibility to do what they can to impact change.
In fact, I heard that his wife and himself had created a nonprofit organization dedicated to trying to address and advocate for young Black men who were killed by gun violence. Are you familiar with that as well?
I'm not familiar with that. I'm not. But once again, just using his star power and the resources that he's built through his hard work to give back to the community, I think that's amazing.
And sadly, while we were broadcasting, we got a hate-filled message that we did not, share with the rest of our viewers. But it is interesting. It's interesting that there is this kind of double-edged sword. On the one hand, you have a rise in divisiveness between people of different races, and at the same time, you have a rise in hatred between people of the same race. And some people think that or suggest that there can be nothing done. Do you believe that, or are you of the mindset that there is absolutely something, as you said, that can be done and must be done different than what we've been doing in the past? Because again, what we've been doing most recently, has only led to a spike in the crime rates all across the country. What do we have to do different? Game changing, if you will.
What do we have to do differently? I don't know. I think every era brings new issues, whether it's new laws that we need to attack, whether it's restrictions on voting. It seems like discrimination and oppression just continues to evolve over time. And I think that we just have to stay vigilant and understand the new strategies, the effective strategies that we can use to overcome the new oppression and the new drivers of violence. So I don't really feed into the hopelessness mindset. I know there's things that can be done. Everybody just has to do their part and keep working. It's not an overnight solution. I think there are things that impact society that are just a product of human nature. And the more that we're aware of those things, I think the better off we are, because then we can solve those problems.
I think we just got another question. what can we do, in your opinion, to balance the scales of justice, to bring our youth out of the kind of they say preschool to prison pipeline, if you will, that allows them to kind of go in and out of the criminal system, starting from getting in trouble while in school, and sometimes those school offenses being escalated to the juvenile justice system, and then um, escalate and graduate to the criminal justice system. What are your thoughts about that?
One thing I would say, obviously, education, informing them of who they really are, where they come from, right? Being accepting of their culture, and you know, supporting them, supporting their culture, right? Because when people feel like they have to assimilate to this other culture that's not familiar to them, that's foreign to them, that they have to be someone that they're not in order to fit in, a lot of people are going to reject that. And then the people who do assimilate may not admit it, but they're probably dealing with a lot of emotional trauma trying to assimilate. And so educate the youth on why they are where they are, and understanding the system. And I think that would kind of instill some pride in who they are, and meeting them where they are. And I think that's one thing that could possibly help affect some change.
Now, another question, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, and I know you've done some family law work as well. Is that correct, or
Actually, no, I don't do a lot of family.
You don't do a lot of family work? But let me ask you. I mean, you may have heard of it. Have you seen a correlation between the number of cases that start off as domestic violence cases, right? Where the court, because any type of conflict that occurs in a home, it creates a automatic 1 year separation between those parties that were involved in that conflict in that home. It's not supposed to be a criminal context or a criminal proceeding, but oftentimes it becomes criminalized. And so the one person is who is oftentimes the male, be it the father, husband of the house, has to leave, and then the remaining party, be it the mother, is there, especially with young children, young boys in particular, and then anytime there's a subsequent contact or subsequent conflict, the husband or the father can be incarcerated, and sometimes he can be incarcerated while he is incurring child support fees, which increases his debt. He's not able to work. He's in jail. Sometimes he loses his job, and then he's getting these exorbitant, in some cases, or difficult to pay child support obligations. Do you think that system itself, the family court system, that creates that, and then ironically, again, I guess surprisingly, that a lot of the children who are in those families find themselves into the juvenile justice system? Do you think that also might be an issue that we need to address? Not to minimize the seriousness of inter-family conflict, but do you think that we need to perhaps take a different approach to that, to try to avoid some of these supposedly, possibly unintended consequences that we see?
Yeah, I'm definitely not an expert on the laws surrounding that, but just from my experience handling domestic violence cases, no, any laws or construct that breaks down the family dynamic, I look at suspectly a little bit. Kind of it. There are certain situations, of course, where individuals don't need to be in the home. If it's an abusive relationship, that person does not need to be in the home, period. But at the same time, I think it's better to try to find some support for people so that families can stay together. And to the extent that we can get resources for people to get the help that they need so they can resolve whatever mental health issues that they're dealing with or whatever issues are causing domestic violence. And I think that's preferable to tearing up the family dynamic. Although in certain circumstances, I think that is the only option. But I think that should be the last resort.
And, let me ask you on the other hand, we heard the governor of Maryland saying, well, his answer, which is seemingly not a new answer, is the answer of increasing jail sentences. And I heard the police union for the District of Columbia said that the reason why that there's been a spike in crime is because there's been a criticism of the way policing is handled. Where there's this, before, as sometime there's been a shoot first, ask later, kind of approach to policing. And they're saying that is the type of policing that brings about a reduction in crime. As a former prosecutor, what is your take?
I mean, if history is any evidence, I mean, over incarceration just doesn't work. It doesn't reduce crime. Over policing doesn't work. And so I think that's pretty much my short and sweet answer to that. I don't think over policing is the answer. I don't think putting people, incarcerating people is the answer. I think giving people resources, investing in the community, I think that's the answer to solving some of these problems.
Now, if I was going to, again, look at this issue of criminalization from another standpoint, in terms of like how it is impacting the economics. There's a lot of people say that this is all a monetary issue, that there are people who are benefiting from the rise in homicides, which again, it sounds inconceivable that this is the case, but some people actually do suggest that there are such people who are benefiting from this type of carnage. Who might be those types of people, and what can be done to either change these people's minds or to maybe at least shine the spotlight on them, who might be bringing about or causing or paving the road or setting the stage for the type of carnage that we have going on in our community.
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of foresee a few entities that might benefit from it. I mean, private prisons, to a certain extent, police budgets sometimes are based on the amount of crime in a given area. And so, I mean, I think the more that we shed light on it, once again, the more we can hold people accountable for doing things that kind of are counterintuitive to helping stop the problem.
Now, one particular question that I've heard oftentimes is that a part of the problem is the relationship between the prosecutors and the police, and that the prosecutors themselves, are, you talk about, budgets, right, that could be cut. If there was a way of reforming, changing the policing system, right, as you may know, and I don't know if you talk about this in your book, and maybe you can share with us some of the contents of your book, but do you talk about the policing system in the context of the history of policing, and again, how it came largely from a slave catching system, and that used to exist in this country. And some people don't realize that the slave catchers weren't just catching African slaves, but also Europeans who were enslaved, but nevertheless, runaways or people who had committed crimes, and they were bounty hunters. And so those are the very early enumerations of what our police departments are today. And so fast forward, people think that that is the construct. So if you were going to, destroy that construct, or eliminate or start over, what do you think could be a better form of policing, where you could have a more service-oriented type of approach to people, keeping people safe in that context?
I think one that's focused on restorative justice, which means, the opposite of punitive justice, which is really focusing on punishing people. Restorative justice, which is something I learned about when I visited South Africa, is really putting the community back in the place that it was in before whatever incident happened. Whereas punitive is, let me punish you and hopefully next time you won't do it, or let me instill some type of fear in you, so hopefully it will deter you from committing this crime. And I think restorative justice, to me, requires that the people who are policing in the community are actually of the community, because that means they're going to care about the people in the community. It's not going to be that them versus us mentality. There has to be trust restored in the community between the people who are being policed. You can't have one group of individuals who are policed differently than others, who receive longer sentences for the same type of conduct, who are arrested more often, who were shot disproportionately. I think until those things change, you're not going to have people who really have respect for the system. And then, of course, you got to tie the economy into that too. People who have less opportunities are more likely to do things, commit crimes, because they have less opportunities. And so that my vision for, a utopian, criminal justice system is one that's completely fair, and one that's based on restorative justice and focused on the community.
Going back to that, and that's a very good point in terms of this question about restorative justice, and community policing. Would you think that the idea of perhaps taking away deadly or lethal weapons might be a part of that? Would it be an idea of investing more in mental health providers than we do police departments? Would it be changing even the whole name from police to public safety, or public service departments, if you will? What from a fundamental standpoint, because a lot of communities have grappled with this, and and they've scaled down the budgets. For example, here in the District of Columbia, scaled down the budget. And now the police unions are saying, well, that's the reason. They said the same thing in Baltimore. And yet, as you might know, I don't know if you know anything about Baltimore, but there are a number of cases in which Baltimore police officers have been convicted for being involved with some of the crimes that are taking place in that city. What are your thoughts about this?
I think it goes back to my previous answer. At the end of the day, there are a lot of small things that you can do, but fundamentally, people in the community know when they're being treated differently by law enforcement, and they know when their lives are valued on a grand scale. And until that changes about the system as a whole, it's going to be difficult for any little small changes to the names of things, or having certain officers not be armed, especially when you live in a country where there are tons of guns. I don't think that changes until fundamentally we change our mentality about how we view specifically African Americans in this country, or those who are marginalized.
And that's a good point. In terms of changing how we view the marginalized, the oppressed, and again, going back to the economics, some might say that the structure of this country is built on a caste system that has to have a marginalized group, and has to have a marginalized kind of caste or class that are divided into castes. So you have the marginalized in general, and then you have to create these racial tiers to prevent this marginalized class from amalgamating and begin to see that these racial differences are not as important, and begin to work together despite their racial differences. Do you think that maybe the fundamental change that we have to have is much more larger than the policies that may some might call tinkering around the edges? Or do you think it's much more fundamental to address this larger system that pits the working class people of this country against one another?
Yeah, I do. I think you hit the nail on the head. I think as long as we continue to believe it's a zero-sum game, the more that you get, the less I get, then people are always going to look for differences in others and find ways to cling to their group and cling to their resources. And, you're different from me. So I'm going to be a little bit cautious of you, or I don't know you, I don't trust you because I want to hold on to what's mine. I'm afraid of you. So I think you're right. I think until we shift that mindset of that, look, the better that everyone does, the better off everyone else is.
I really have enjoyed this conversation. And I have a couple of just ending questions to ask you. First of all, if you were going to, if I was going to read the book on the epilogue of Martinis Jackson, like the last years, what would you like those pages to look like? What are some of the accomplishments that you would like to have made, before your life ends?
Yeah, I hope to make a lasting impact on my family, leave a positive legacy, try to do more good in this world than harm. And yeah, he was overall a good person. He helped his family and he helped the community. And I hope that's what my epilogue will say.
And let me ask you, I mean, again, going back to the issue of health, for example, in living a good life. What are you doing now to keep yourself healthy? Some folks know that we, in terms of Abe, have started off as being a legal tech platform, but recently acquired a health component, and now created Abe for yoga, or Abe Yoga, and are really looking at the idea of how many people are living unhealthy lifestyles. And some might even say that these unhealthy, lack of exercise, lack of eating properly is what is leading to some of this violence. What is your overall take about health and wellness, and what are you doing to keep you and your family fit and healthy?
I think three things, man. I'm trying to get away from this mindset of this competitive mindset that is, at least in part, a part of capitalism, in my opinion. Compete, pursue financial gain and materialism. So that's number one. I think number two, each day I'm trying to take walks and just get out more. Sorry, that's my wife in the background there. But trying to get out more. She's letting the dogs out. I try to go for a walk with the dogs every day. Try to exercise at least once a day. And I think also reading more books about mental health. One book that I'm reading right now is The Unapologetic Guide to African-American Mental Health. I believe that's the name of it. And it's been a really, really good book. So I think those are the three primary things that I've been doing since COVID to kind of keep myself sane and just keep myself going.
Well, we hope that we can get you in one of these yoga classes. Because I can tell you from the yoga class that we had just yesterday, it was, these deep stretching, man, exercises that are done that are really uncomfortable, starting off at least, that puts your body in this, at least initially, in a little pain, but afterwards, man, you really get a release, man, and your body becomes stronger and becomes more limber. Your breathing increases, and your overall mental health is improved, because once you realize there's a passage in the Quran that I believe is also echoed in some pages of the Bible, but it says in Arabic, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا, which means with every difficulty there comes ease. With every difficulty there comes ease, and so it's always kind of like the adage. And you said you play basketball, but no pain, no gain. You know what I mean? So putting your body through that at least initial temporary pain by doing some form of working out, has a benefit to increase our overall health. Is that your take as well?
Oh, most definitely, man. And I will say I used to do a little bit of Bikram yoga as well. I will say, counter to that, although I agree with you 100%, it's good to rest too, because there were times where I was pushing myself a little bit too hard in the gym. And as I get up there in age, I do think things like yoga are probably a little better than heavy weightlifting or just a lot of rigorous workout. So definitely that balance is important.
I totally agree with you. Well, in conclusion, tell me, if I was going to, talk to or if you were going to talk to a 17-year-old Martinez Jackson, living in what part of Memphis did you grow up in? Was it Orange Mound, or what part did you live in?
So early childhood, Orange Mound, but most of my adolescence was East Memphis.
Okay, so over there near Hickory Hill Mall, and that part of the area. Okay,
Exactly.
I know
Yep.
that
You know what it is.
we lived over there off of Killarney. I don't know, that part of the East Memphis community, but if you were there, talking to a 17-year-old Martinez, what advice might you give him as a way of trying to even do even better than what you've already done and had an illustrious career so far? What might you advise yourself?
Yeah, never stop learning, never give up on yourself, never forget who you are, and always prioritize your own mental health and your family over everything else.
Well, I think that is an important lesson, and I think that is a perfect ending to a really wonderful conversation. Martinez, it's been tremendously beneficial to learn from you over this time that we've had together. I think that there are a lot of ideas that you shared, and I believe, as reflected in some of the comments, that people really appreciate those ideas. And again, that's the beauty of Abe. We have a tremendously talented cadre of lawyers who are world class, as we talk about, folks who are specialists in areas such as constitutional law, criminal law, personal injury, as is the case with Attorney Jackson, as well as other areas of law, and they are available to help you day or night. Martinez, has been great talking with you, and we wish you success.
Thank you, Talib. Thanks for having me.
This has been Talib Kareem, a wonderful conversation with Attorney Martinez Jackson. If you would like to meet with Attorney Jackson and seek his advice on any of the issues that we've discussed tonight, or any issues that you have concerning either criminal law, personal injury, or constitutional law, please go and visit abe.legal, and we'll make sure that we put that into the link to the right so you can have it. Or if you are interested in getting some physical and mental well-being through exercising, starting off with yoga and Pilates and other forms of exercise without leaving your home, then we want you to visit abeyoga.com. Two great platforms that we have created and made available to you for your benefit. And we pray that it has both a healing impact to you as well as your family. This has been, again, Talib Kareem, CEO of Abe. We are here for you day or night, and we look forward to joining you on our next Abe Podcast. Until then, have a wonderful day or evening. Ciao.